On this Thursday night, we told you about the lives lost after the Danforth shooting. Tonight, an exclusive look at one of the lives forever changed. When gunfire rang out, Danielle Kane and her boyfriend ran to help a victim, only to be shot herself. Tonight, she's in the ICU. Her fight to recover and the doctor who saved her life.
Also tonight, what's behind Facebook's record stock collapse?
And the new voice of Vancouver Transit, the tweet that convinced Seth Rogen to bring his comedy to SkyTrain.
This is The National.
For the first time tonight, we're hearing details about one of the survivors of last Sunday's attack on the Danforth. How Danielle Kane rushed out onto the street to help a victim, but instead she became the last person to be shot and tonight remains in St. Michael's Hospital with injuries that are life-altering. In a CBC News exclusive, her cousin talks to us about what happened to her that night and what's ahead.
Today is my first time here.
Byron Abelow says he still finds it difficult to process what happened at this restaurant Sunday night. His cousin, Danielle Kane, and her boyfriend, Jerry Pinkston, were having dinner when they heard someone had been shot. Pinkston, an emergency room nurse, went out a side door to help. Kane, a nursing student, was right behind. That's when they came face to face with the shooter who was walking by.
He turned, he made eye contact with Jerry, and Jerry said he doesn't remember seeing a gun, but he remembers hearing a sound, a click or something, and then seeing that him lift his arms towards him. And Jerry was able to duck out of the way behind some patio tables. And that, I think, was the moment where Danny came through the door and just kind of walked into that situation.
Now, Abelow says it's not clear if his cousin will walk again. She was hit in the spine by a bullet, and that's just one of her challenges as she remains at St. Michael's Hospital in intensive care.
The bullet ruptured her stomach and her diaphragm, and some of the fluids from her stomach were getting into her abdomen. So as we speak right now, her abdomen is still open, and they've done a couple of surgeries and procedures to wash it out, make sure it's clean. And if all the things go well, tomorrow morning they'll be able to close it up. And then that's the first big hurdle for her, is to heal from that, which should take about 6 weeks is what I've heard.
And then there's the injury to her spine. Not life-threatening, but almost certainly life-changing.
Out of our family and out of our cousins, like Danielle is like, she's that spark plug. She's a smile, and she's bright and colorful, and strong and opinionated, and to think that she might not be able to do the things that she loves to do, like dance and be athletic and go on hikes and stuff, that it just is tragic.
Abelow was asked by Danielle's family to speak publicly, but he says they know they're not the only ones struggling.
This whole community is grieving. 2 families have lost daughters, and there are many other survivors who have to deal with this fallout from this senseless and tragic event.
And so Danielle's family continues to support her at her hospital bedside and launching a GoFundMe campaign for what will be a long road to recovery. And later tonight, we'll hear from one of the people who helped save Kane's life along with several other victims, Dr. Najma Ahmed at St. Michael's Hospital here in Toronto. And I want to play you a small excerpt from that conversation where she says that some of the survivors still have a long road ahead.
I think there tends to be a focus for the public and, for the media about an intensity and focus in the first many days about how this happened and what how many people survived and who didn't survive. But for patients who suffer trauma, be it from a motor vehicle crash or a motorcycle accident or a gunshot wound, they are going to be in the hospital for months. And then they require rehabilitation for months and months. They're often young people, as I've outlined, but it changes their life and they're never the same. And it's never the same for the family. The physical burden of injury is huge, not to mention the psychological burden.
So you'll hear more of my conversation with Dr. Ahmed in about 30 minutes. And Andrew, she describes how that night unfolded and what was going through her mind when at home she got the call to respond.
Yeah, I mean, from her point of view, it must be one of those things that you prepare for but never fully expect.
And you know, it wasn't just the number of victims, she said, but she also talks about the realization as she was doing her work that someone targeted these victims, many of them so young, in an act so senseless.
And there's lots more to come on the program here tonight. Facebook has suffered a record loss on the stock market. And as you'll hear from our business reporter, Jacqueline Hansen, the loss of confidence may be the bigger blow.
And tonight, another deadline for the U.S. government to reunite separated children, but it's unclear just how many kids have been returned to their parents.
First, though, a serious criminal charge laid against a Toronto teacher after one of his students died on a field trip. That the teacher could be held responsible in that way may be unprecedented. But as Nicole Ireland explains, much has come to light in the year since a school canoe trip ended in tragedy.
What was supposed to be an adventure in the outdoors for Toronto high school students turned into a desperate search operation. It ended with divers finding the body of 15-year-old Jeremiah Perry. He drowned while swimming in Big Trout Lake at Algonquin Park. Ontario Provincial Police launched an investigation and today announced they were charging Nicholas Mills, a teacher from Jeremiah's high school who organized and supervised the trip, with criminal negligence causing death. The Toronto District School Board says Mills has been on home assignment since the accident happened.
We continue to be very troubled by the fact that it would appear that our safety requirements were not followed on this trip over a year ago.
Those safety requirements included a swim test. At the time, the board said every student who went on the camping trip had to have passed it. It turned out half of them, including Jeremiah, failed it. This Toronto defense lawyer says he's never seen a teacher face a charge like this after an accident on a school trip.
In a circumstance, we were going on a camping trip to another part of the province without the parents. And basically the only adult supervisors are going to be the teachers for a few days or a few nights. I can certainly see, I'd be surprised if the court doesn't find that the teachers are pretty much stepping into the role of the parents in those circumstances.
Joshua Anderson, Jeremiah's father, says the charge is warranted. In a statement today, he said, although nothing that happens now can bring back Jeremiah or take away the pain of losing him, we hope that having the case proceed through the criminal justice system will be one important step in ensuring that a tragedy like this never happens again on a school trip. To make sure it doesn't, the school board says it now requires parents to acknowledge they've seen the results of their children's swim tests. And if they don't pass, they don't go on field trips involving water. Nicole Ireland, CBC News, Toronto.
So this is a case that is important for a number of reasons, but it also raises a big question that other teachers will have to answer for themselves. We asked a union rep for his thoughts.
So I suspect that teachers will be assessing their own comfort level with those kind of risks right now. I hope it doesn't have a chilling effect, but rather just an effect of making sure that both the employer and the teacher involved are fully aware of the responsibilities and the processes, and just a stricter adherence to them and an assurance that they're rigid and well followed is what I hope for. But there could be a chilling effect.
And he says he also hopes changes are made at the school board level to look over and improve the rules around field trips and to keep students safe.
Now to the worst day of trading for one of the world's biggest companies. Facebook set a record for the most money lost in a single day on Wall Street. A huge chunk, 19% of its market value disappeared. We're talking more than $100 billion, way more than the GDP of some small countries. So let's bring in our business reporter, Jacqueline Hansen, who's been looking into why. Let's begin with what happened today.
Well, yeah, I mean, up until today, it was a bit of a surprise today when we saw this drop, because up until today, Facebook's growth seemed practically unstoppable. But we did see that seems to be not the case anymore. In the company's conference call yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg was pretty frank about the company's weak spots.
We're investing so much in security that it will significantly impact our profitability. We're starting to see that this quarter.
Facebook says it can't keep up its rapid growth while it spends more money on privacy and security.
We will continue to invest heavily in security and privacy because we have a responsibility to keep people safe.
And it's being forced to by new rules in the European Union to protect consumer privacy. That's already slowing advertising growth there. But it was Facebook's plan to shift ads from news feeds to stories, a newer feature of photos and videos that last just 24 hours, that made some analysts skeptical.
There's an argument to be made that they're switching to stories, they're switching away from the really successful ad model because the other ad model was failing with respect to security. And that means that they aren't being proactive, they actually are being reactive, and they don't necessarily have a plan. They don't know if it's going to work.
Plus, it has another potential problem. Users aren't signing up at the rates they used to. And this expert points to one possible reason.
There's an entire younger generation, younger demographic that's not using the platform.
Then there's the Cambridge Analytica data scandal, lingering privacy concerns, and the spread of fake news, all likely testing users' trust. But will they leave?
Because it is so big, I don't think it's going to be any kind of immediate drop-off that we see. But could this be the beginning of a slow decline for the platform? I think that there's no doubt that that's the case.
So what we saw today was investors reacting to some pretty big concerns. The cost of privacy rules in the EU, it's slowing user and revenue growth, and a warning that profit will likely be squeezed for quarters, if not years to come. But despite all that, Ian, this is, as you said, still one of the most valuable tech companies in the world. But what it lost today, along with that drop in its market value, was many investors' confidence in the company.
And the numbers are so big, they're kind of hard to grasp. Thank you very much, Jacqueline.
You're welcome.
Facebook also revealed in the earnings report that it's losing users in Europe, but for the company's bottom line, stalling user growth in the United States and Canada is far bigger problem. Let's show you what we mean. Facebook makes an average of nearly $6 of revenue per person. That is globally. Now you break it down by region. The average value of a European user was close to $9, but an American or Canadian user, well, almost $26. The big difference is that advertisers, where almost all of Facebook's revenue comes from, sees users in the United States and Canada as more affluent. So that's what you're worth to Facebook. What about what Facebook is worth to Mark Zuckerberg? Well, today's stock drop hit his personal stake too. His net worth lost close to $16 billion, but he's still doing pretty well. He's worth about $67 billion according to Forbes.
Well, the U.S. government scrambled today to reunite migrant children with their families. They were separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy for people trying to slip across the border. And a judge ordered the government to fix that by today. It says mission accomplished, but critics aren't so sure. Now, today's deadline was to bring children 5 and over back together with their families. The Justice Department says around 1,800 of them have been reunited with their parents or released to relatives or other sponsors. But there are still hundreds of children in government custody. So can the Trump administration call this a win, or did today's scramble reveal a mess that defies accountability? It's a tricky question that we asked Paul Hunter to take on.
Outside a social services center in New York today, and a kind of chaos amid rushed efforts to reunite families forcibly separated at the U.S.-Mexico border. Here, children taken from their parents by the U.S. government were part of a last-minute court-ordered push to be taken back to their parents by today. But it's unclear how many made it or where they ended up. Though there's been evidence lately of tearfully happy reunions, critics underline, hold your applause.
It doesn't excuse what the government did, but we are going to be enormously pleased that children are in their parents' arms.
Indeed, under a directive by the Trump administration earlier this year, anyone caught crossing into the U.S. illegally, even those fleeing strife, were to be federally prosecuted. That meant cages in detention centers in Texas and children taken from their parents.
Let the children go!
Public outcry was fierce, and the backlash led to a California judge ordering the government to reunite the families. The government says it's made great progress, but acknowledges it's lost track of some parents, and more than 400 other parents have already been deported without their children. It's unclear how or even if they'll ever be reunited.
Return the kids!
In Washington today, children and other demonstrators marched toward Capitol Hill to press the U.S. government to find a way to make sure all families are eventually reunited. Even as the Trump administration defended its position that U.S. immigration policy must be hardened.
You do not get to come to America unlawfully. Let's just make that clear. This system is built on making your application and waiting your turn.
Indeed, even the tearful reunions come with a caveat. Deportation hearings now await for most.
And so, Paul, the deadline has come and gone, and there are still kids in custody. So what now?
Yeah, well, good question. No one knows. It's kind of uncharted territory. It is a court order, so consequences are possible. For example, government officials could be fined or imprisoned. That said, it's much more likely that a judge would see good faith, that the government has been trying to get this done on time and allow some leeway. Still, the whole idea of the deadline was to get it done, so there likely wouldn't be too much wiggle room. But, you know, keep in mind, this is a problem entirely of the U.S. government's own making. And in that it's also the government that's now deported those 400-plus parents without their kids already. Your guess is as good as anyone's, as I say, how they'll ever get reunited. The Washington Post today wrote a particularly scathing editorial about all of it, calling the whole episode a contemptuous, cruel, noxious humanitarian outrage. So it's clear that regardless of any penalty by the courts, if any, the Trump administration's already paid a stiff price in the public eye for its approach on this.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Some of the other developing stories we are tracking tonight include an update from authorities in Greece. They think this week's deadly fire may have been started deliberately. Here's a look today at what's left in a coastal town near Athens. After being ravaged by wildfire, 82 people are dead, 187 others were hurt, including more than 20 children. Authorities say they suspect arson because satellite images and ground inspections suggest the fire broke out in multiple places in a relatively short time frame.
पाकिस्तानी कौम ने पार्टिसिपेट नहीं किया इलेक्शन में जो आज किया.
That was former cricket star Imran Khan claiming victory today in Pakistan's general election. We're still waiting on final results, so we don't know yet if his party will get a majority or be forced to form a coalition. But Khan's rivals have already rejected the outcome. They say the vote count was rigged.
I do not expect to make any public comments about the case, and Mr. Hogarth's position will become clear in due course.
That's the lawyer for Headley's lead singer, Jacob Hogarth, outside a Toronto courthouse today. Hogarth was arrested Monday and charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of sexual interference. His lawyer appeared in court on his behalf today, but it was short. His case was put over until next month.
Still ahead on the National, researchers have discovered mutated strains of HIV in Saskatchewan that makes AIDS develop faster. We'll take you through the new study.
Plus, the resource crisis facing RCMP investigators, why a decision to close forensics labs is putting prosecutions at risk.
And how one tweet brought a famous Vancouver voice to the transit system. It's our moment of the day.
So I suggested Seth Rogen just very casually online, and a lot of people agreed.
Any opportunity to enrich the lives of the Canadian people is an opportunity I will take.
You can't just sit back and play with your own little world. There are other worlds out there. Lots of them. And you can't just ignore them or brush them aside. You see, the world you know is really made up of lots of other worlds, and all of them have their own problems, which, in fact, become your problems. And worlds aren't made up simply of problems. Good things happen, exciting things, and they all affect you. The thing is to understand what's happening. And to understand, you have to have a complete and comprehensive view of matters. And where to get this information? It's easy. The national news, nightly, on CBC Television. So welcome other worlds into your life. It's almost fun. the national news. 5 nights a week in the national newsroom of CBC Television, the stories come in from all parts of the world to be interpreted and prepared for use on The National. The facts are checked and the backgrounds gathered. On-the-spot reports are collected. Then the films and the tapes are evaluated and edited, readied for the air. CBC's correspondents in all corners of the world report and interpret the news. Wherever things are happening, you'll get the complete information right here on CBC Television.
I'm Warren Davis. Those are just some of the things that go into The National. Join me.
There is a compelling new reason to get tested for HIV in Saskatchewan. Researchers have discovered mutated strains of the virus there, which can lead to faster developing AIDS-related illnesses. Olivia Stefanovich explains.
I just couldn't believe it. My life just flashed before me because I knew it was going to be totally changed.
Daryl Caldwell has been living with HIV for 7 years. He comes from Cote First Nation in Saskatchewan, where HIV rates are 11 times higher than the national average.
A lot of these people are covering up sexual trauma, so they turn their way to the bottle or to the needle.
80% of people who have HIV in the province are Indigenous. Caldwell is in hospital for other health reasons. He wants others to know people with the virus can live long, comfortable lives.
Get tested is the #1 thing I'm stressing out there.
Today's study in the scientific journal AIDS underscores that. Researchers heard about an HIV mutation in Japan and went looking for it in Saskatchewan. They found it, especially but not only in the Indigenous population.
We're all humans. We all share the same gene pool.
The study found anyone with a mutation could rapidly develop AIDS-related illnesses, but that antiviral drugs work if the HIV is caught early.
The medications that we have to treat HIV work equally well.
Cookers. It's just the usual, yeah.
Water. Okay, there's filters and a container.
Yeah.
At this harm reduction agency in Regina, they exchange more than 6,000 needles each day to prevent the spread of HIV. Workers say more education is needed.
We are still finding that people are not fully using these resources, and that's mainly because of a lack of awareness.
HIV groups are pushing for more people to get tested, and Saskatchewan is spending an additional $600,000 this year for HIV medications. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Regina.
About 75,000 Canadians have HIV, but 1 in 5 don't know it, which makes transmitting the virus much more likely. In 2016, there were more than 2,300 new HIV infections. That's up more than 11% from the year before. And Saskatchewan has the highest diagnosis rate, more than double the national average. And Nova Scotia has seen 16 new HIV cases in the first 6 months of 2018. That's usually what the province sees in an entire year. Now, it's unclear what's caused the jump, but it's prompted the province to take steps. It's expanding access to pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. Jurisdictions that fund the medication have reported a 40% decrease in new HIV cases. And coming up on The National, the aviation world remembers a pioneer who made history. We will tell you the story of Mary Ellis.
And my full interview with Dr. Najma Ahmed. She tells us what it was like in St. Michael's Hospital Sunday night as 5 of the victims were rushed there after the deadly shooting on the Danforth.
The mood was very much serious. The mood was very much get your head in the game. The mood was very much let's all pull in the same direction and make sure that we save as many lives and minimize as much damage as we can.
What's up, everyone? My name is Leonard Monkman. Today we're in Winnipeg's North End. It's the neighborhood that I grew up in. We're going to take you to a barbershop that's owned by an Indigenous woman on Selkirk Avenue.
Hi, my name is Peter. Welcome to my barbershop.
Oh, the North End means a lot to me because this is where all my friends and family live, and it's a beautiful part of the city.
What do you like about living in the North End, Peter?
Feels like home.
Feels like home.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here without my community if the people didn't come to support the shop. I wouldn't make it here.
What are some things that you like about the North End since you've been living here?
I guess, you know, my street, Alfred, it's fairly quiet. Unfortunately, there was that shooting of the young guy last, 6-8 months ago or something like that. Yeah. Unfortunate. But all in all, you know, actually I've been getting to know my neighbors a little bit more. My neighbor gave my little girl the tricycle that she has,
And they recommended you to come here?
Yeah.
What'd they say?
Yeah, they just said, I said, where's a good place to get a haircut? She ran back inside and Mom told her and said, come here, they're pretty good, so.
It's your first time here?
Yeah, they gave me directions like, you know, like native way.
This is how.
That's it, eh?
What made you start up a business in the North End?
Probably because of the, there's a lot of Aboriginal people around here. And I like working with my people. They like that the language can be spoken. Because a lot of times, a lot of people will sit here and speak the language and they like that. But you know what?
Yeah.
Do you like the cat? Do you remember shopping when you were a kid on Selkirk Avenue?
Yeah. Red apple and all that, yeah.
Tell us a story about shopping on Selkirk.
Skipping school to go shopping, my mom, that's boy.
Things that you see that might give you hope about this community.
Well, maybe the school's opening up in the area. And there's some businesses that are starting to open up.
For maybe about 10 years I lived in the North End here and never had any problems, you know.
How would you describe the people in the North End?
It varies, you know. There's some good and some bad, you know. It all depends. It's usually the younger people that get influenced by the bad elements of people. They get led in the wrong direction right off the bat before they even get a chance to choose what they want to be. Yeah, they don't get free haircuts, I think. Big much.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys, I'll be back.
Bye.
Well, we just wanted to say thank you for letting us join you today. Hopefully it wasn't too much, but
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
For choosing us.
Okay, well, we'll see you later.
Okay, we'll see you again. Thanks.
Is the cat's not going to run away?
No.
You want to be here to say that this isn't okay, but we're not scared.
People in Toronto continue to visit and contribute to the growing memorial for victims of last Sunday's mass shooting on the Danforth. A march and vigil drew thousands of people last night, including Mayor John Tory and the Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The outpouring of support for the victims has been huge, but less well known are the stories of those who responded. Well, earlier today, I spoke with Dr. Najma Ahmed, a trauma surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, who led one of the teams that worked through the night to save victims' lives. In our conversation, which was held inside one of the operating rooms, she describes just how quickly things unfolded. Let's start with when you got the call. You were at home on Sunday night. What time did you get the call?
I think, as I recall, I got the call shortly after 10:20 or 10:30. So Dr. Lawless was the primary trauma surgeon on call, and I got a text, are you around? Multiple GSWs, multiple gunshot wounds. And I answered, yeah, I'm at home, text me if you need me. 5 minutes later, or less than 5 minutes later, actually, the chief of critical care called me on my phone and said there's been a code orange at the hospital. So code orange means that there's a catastrophe in the city, there's a mass casualty or some other emergency in the city. And so it's all hands on deck, means that nobody who's currently in the hospital can go home, even if their shift is over or whatever. That includes the porters, everybody stays put. We call in backup teams from home. So I live about 10 minutes from the hospital, so I got into my scrubs and I drove into the hospital. And as I came down Shooter, I could see there was lots of ambulances and lots of police cars, and I had a sense then it was going to be a tough night and something catastrophic had happened in the city.
At what point did you get a clearer sense of how big it was?
I didn't really get a clear sense of how big it was for a few hours. As I came in, I was told that Dr. Lawless was already in the operating room performing surgery on the first patient, and then there was multiple other patients that I triaged and assessed and realized that a second patient needed to go emergently to the operating room. So we rushed that patient upstairs. We got the OR was on standby, as is the case for a mass casualty situation. So we got started almost immediately. And I don't think it was until about 4 o'clock in the morning, really, that I got a clear sense of the scale of what had happened, how many patients had gone to which hospitals, how many patients required surgery, and that sort of stuff.
What was the mood inside here? If I'd been able to walk around where you were walking around that night?
I think the mood was very much serious. The mood was very much get your head in the game. The mood was very much let's all pull in the same direction and make sure that we save as many lives and minimize as much damage as we can. And every single person that I saw that night, I saw that in their eyes.
I mean, for people on the street in the Danforth, there were so many questions, there was so much uncertainty, it was also unsettling, a sense of unease. Was there any of that here, or was there a point at which that kind of seeped into here as well?
I think there was a sense of shock and a sense of this can't happen here, and how did this happen? We're Toronto, we're Canada, this does not happen here. For sure, that was seeping into everyone's consciousness as the hours rolled by. In the moment, I think we were all very much focused on the job that we had to do right then. And since then, of course, there has been a lot of dismay and concern about how this could have happened and what we're going to do about it.
Was there anything different when you were in the OR that night and the next day, given the nature of this event?
I think as the information was trickling in, you come in, you know what you have to do, you get very laser focused, you do what you have to do. You stand over the patient and you're organizing your team and you fix injuries. I think because of the circumstances, because it was in the heart of the city, and because the loss of life has been so tragic and at such a innocent age, I think I got a sense that this was different. That for me was, it's kind of crushing, kind of soul crushing when that information started trickling into the operating rooms as we were operating and treating patients as the night and the next days went by. We see a loss of life, but this kind of mass casualty gunman thing in the heart of the city is not something that we're accustomed to in a city like Toronto.
I normally wouldn't in an interview ask somebody a question that involves their religion, but Mohammed Leela, a reporter who used to work for CBC, who's Muslim, tweeted that the gunman was Muslim, but so too was one of the key doctors, one of the acting directors at St. Michael's Hospital, and you saw that tweet and you were touched by it.
Yeah, that tweet was brought to my attention, or that Facebook post was brought to my attention, and I was somewhat touched by it. And it's out there, so perhaps it's worth talking about. I guess I would say that, every day millions and billions of people on planet Earth get up, regardless of their faith or their religion, or even if they don't have faith in a God, get up and every day and go about their business and try and make the world a better place. And I'm just one of those billions of people. I just happen to be in the business of saving lives. And that night, my job was to save these lives.
A lot of people in Toronto have done a lot of thinking over the last few days, and they've wondered, is their city safe? Has their city changed? What can they do to make their city better? Have you had any moments like that?
For sure. We've had a lot of conversations like that at St. Michael's Hospital. I think our city has changed for sure, something like this affects the way we think about our community and about our city. I don't think it'll ever go back to being the same. And what can be done about it is a very important question. And what can be done about it is, I think we have to think very deliberately and carefully about gun safety legislation and firearm legislation in our country, because I personally believe it's a slippery slope. Unless we get a handle on it now, we're going to be in a place that we maybe don't want to be in the decades to come.
There were 5 victims taken to St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, where Dr. Ahmed works. 3 of them required surgery, and she took part in all 3 of those operations. You can find more on the exclusive stories we brought you from the Danforth tonight on our Instagram page at CBC The National.
Before we go to break, we do want to show you the story of another remarkable woman. British Prime Minister Theresa May is among those paying tribute today to Mary Ellis, a trailblazing aviator. She's died at the age of 101 after long being one of the few surviving female pilots from the Second World War. Ellis was on hand this spring to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Royal Air Force, an organization she predated by 1 year. During the war, she joined the Air Transport Auxiliary, delivering aircraft from the factories to the front lines. At first, women were trusted only with trainers and transport planes, but a labor shortage meant she was soon flying Spitfires, Wellingtons, and dozens of other warplanes. She recalled how one ground crew refused to believe a woman had delivered their new bomber.
I said, I am the pilot. And they didn't believe me. And they actually went in the airplane and searched it to find a pilot. And they came back and said, there's nobody there, you must be.
Ellis and her colleagues were the first women to receive equal pay from the British government for doing the same work as men. After the war, Ellis moved to the Isle of Wight, where she managed the local airport for 20 years, and she married a pilot. She said she never forgot the exhilarating freedom of flight.
Up in the air on your own, and you can do whatever you like. You know, I flew 400 Spitfires, and occasionally I would take one up and go and play with the clouds, which was so delightful and lovely. Oh, I can't tell you how wonderful it was.
People knew the Ontario government didn't like happy hour, but most were surprised it moved so quickly to ban cheap drinks. Some bar owners are pleased.
They were coming in for the reduced prices, and after work, jumping in their cars after and going along the street. The best move they could have made was by canceling the happy hours. I do it right now is because my competition doesn't, and I have to be like the rest of them.
But others complain there's stiff competition around their bars. And to survive when happy hour ends, they may have to have happy hour prices all the time.
Possibly, if we lower the prices across the board, we should retain some of our business.
The announcement came in the legislature today. The reason? The government thinks happy hour has increased the number of impaired drivers. That's only a perception. There are no statistics to back that belief. But the minister says perception is a good enough reason to ban happy hour.
The perception of it, at least, if not the reality, and I think it was a reality, was that on the way home you were being enticed to stop and have a drink and then drive on.
Among customers at happy hour, reaction is mixed. Some agree it contributes to impaired driving and should be banned.
I think it's a good idea, especially in the Christmas season.
Others say most people don't drink a lot during happy hour.
People might come in for one drink. That would be about it. En route somewhere else. Very few people sit around and drink all night.
While others are angry because they say the government's meddling where it doesn't belong.
I think that we are losing control again. They are telling us and they're dictating to us. And I don't agree with them.
Whatever customers think, Ontario's police chiefs and groups like Pride, people to reduce impaired driving everywhere, don't like cheap drinks. And they're the reason Ontario will become the first province in Canada to ban happy hour. Michael McIver, CBC News, Toronto.
Carl Burden is the Executive Director of Alcohol and Drug Concerns.
The organization has been actively fighting happy hour since its introduction to Ontario drinkers a couple of years ago.
We believe that the introduction of happy hours at the time in which they are usually applied means that people are going to be leaving and driving home tired from a day's work and with the added inconvenience of a few drinks. And this, in fact, would have caused serious problems and probably already has caused serious problems in Ontario.
Happy hour attracts the after-work crowd by offering drinks at reduced prices. Surprisingly, bars don't make any money on that added business.
Financially, I don't think we're going to be losing business because we lose money when we give happy hour to people. The only people that are benefiting, I think, is the customer.
Do you find that during happy hour you do drink just a touch more?
Absolutely, for sure, yeah. Once you,
cheaper.
Yeah, less expensive, and once you get going, it's hard to stop.
After work, I would like to come and have a beer, and if it's cheaper, that'll get me in here.
Many bars are thinking of keeping happy hour, but with a difference. Instead of lower prices for drinks after work, they'll offer a bite to eat with your beverage. Kathy Legedza, CBC News, Toronto.
Johnny's back.
Foo-foo.
Yeah, foo-foo.
I was like, who's foo-foo?
Lots of laughs. My cheeks are sore.
Loyal fans.
He was off the floral Richterite scale.
Can't get enough.
I do not look like that.
Johnny Suja.
Good job, Johnny.
More like Benny Hula. Crazy.
Okay. Still crazy. Still standing.
Awesome.
I don't know how he does that.
Thanks so much.
Still standing. Returns September 18th on CBC. Part of the Tuesday night comedy lineup.
Welcome back. On the National tonight, look at that. Menacing-looking clouds rolling over the Toronto skyline. It got people buzzing on social media with lots of folks sharing photos as the city suddenly got dark. But it was surrounding areas that took the brunt of the storm.
That is absolutely crazy.
Few in southern Ontario escaped the sudden downpours of hail, ice pellets the size of nickels at times.
Marble-sized hail right now. Really big winds.
And it wasn't just hail. The storm also brought strong winds, thunder, lightning, and heavy rain. And what made it all the more jarring, yes, there was ice, but it was also hot, with the humidex making temperatures feel like the mid-30s. Another project by Quebec director Robert Lepage has been cancelled following allegations of cultural appropriation. Members of the Indigenous community had criticized a play called Canada for its lack of meaningful involvement of Indigenous people. In a statement, Lepage's company said it made the decision after American co-producers withdrew their support. You may recall earlier this month, the Montreal Jazz Festival dropped another Lepage production. That show, too, was criticized for cultural appropriation.
I just want to say I'm thankful to the DA and the judge for allowing me to move forward. I want to say to my friends, my family, my fans, thank you for the support.
That was UFC fighter Conor McGregor after pleading guilty today to disorderly conduct. He was facing multiple charges after a brawl earlier this year at a New York arena. With today's plea, he avoids jail time, but he has to undergo anger management treatment and complete 5 days of community service. A bit of a rocky start this week to a European soccer club's first ever joint tour by their men's and women's teams. After it emerged, only the men got to fly in business class. Fans of FC Barcelona's women's team criticized the club online after photos showed the female players in economy. The club says it was a logistical issue, that the flight was booked before it was decided the women's team would join, and not enough business seats were available. 2 years ago this month, the Supreme Court of Canada implemented the Jordan decision, a ruling intended to improve access to speedy trials, a key plank in the criminal code. Instead, it has caused severely strained resources, grinding parts of the system to a near halt. Tonight, we'll look at that impact, starting with our Rob Antle, who explores how the ruling, in conjunction with recent decisions by the RCMP, created a whole new problem getting to trial.
As a longtime defense lawyer and former federal prosecutor, Adam Stephen Bonney has seen the justice system from both sides. But he's never seen it under pressure the way it is now.
The Supreme Court of Canada made it clear. The culture of complacency is dead. It's over.
In the Jordan decision 2 years ago, the top court set strict timelines for the right to a speedy trial. But there's work to do before those cases get to court, and it's taking longer and longer for RCMP labs to process firearms forensic reports.
For the prosecutor, it creates an untenable state of affairs. For the accused, especially those who are innocent, it's completely unacceptable.
Many police forces across the country rely on the RCMP to do work like this, testing guns, analyzing bullets, and RCMP statistics show the results are slower to arrive. 4 years ago, routine firearms testing took about 56 days. In the past year, that number had ballooned to 238 days. Behind me here in Ottawa, the RCMP operates one of its 3 labs. A few years back, it closed 3 others, a decision that had a cascading effect. Some specialized staff decided not to relocate, creating a resource crisis that's been felt in the courtroom.
When the lab comes back and tells me that they have 230 days turnaround time to get a report back on a gun, that's an enormous problem for us.
Crown Prosecutor Rick Woodburn surveyed colleagues across Canada, and the news is not good.
From reports that I'm getting across the country, charges are being stayed, charges are being reduced, and sometimes even withdrawn by prosecutors because of the delays in getting those reports back.
In one Newfoundland murder trial, a preliminary inquiry ground to a halt for 7 months, waiting for a gun testing report. And in Manitoba, delays in disclosing forensic results factored into a judge's decision to throw out weapons charges. The good news is the Mounties now believe they are turning the corner. Lab jobs may soon be filled and turnaround times have gone down in recent months. All this as new stats show that gun violence in Canada is still on the rise. Rob Antle, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now here's a little more on those rates of gun violence Rob mentioned. According to Statistics Canada, they are up across the country. StatsCan recorded more than 2,700 violent gun crimes last year. That's up more than 7% from 2016. The biggest spike was in Saskatchewan, with a jump of almost 50%. Ontario was second at 10%. Homicides committed with a gun are also up. According to the most recent numbers, there were 223 firearm-related homicides in 2016, more than half related to gang activity, mostly in Toronto and Vancouver. Now, earlier, Rob examined the effects of the Jordan decision on criminal law, but that's only one part of the system. Back in March, our Carolyn Dunn looked at how the ruling was affecting civil law as well, by effectively robbing Peter to pay Paul.
In a wooded lot a half-hour north of Edmonton, Sandra Paraderi is living a life more rustic than she ever could have imagined. Firewood for heat from a wood stove.
And no running water, no.
No running water, no electricity.
Paraderi's common-law husband died 4 years ago, but there's a legal battle over the estate. She can't get her rightful share until it's settled. She's broke, living mainly on a survivor's pension and the goodwill of others. Her lawyer says if that case goes to trial, it probably won't be scheduled before 2021.
I get it. I got to start over, but I didn't think I was going to have to start over from under the barrel. Not even the bottom. It's twisted.
Hers is one of an untold number of civil cases facing lengthy delays, systemic delays that in some jurisdictions seem to grow only longer with each passing month. Part of the problem comes courtesy of the Supreme Court of Canada in what's known as the Jordan decision of July 2016. It ruled criminal trials must be completed within 18 months for relatively minor cases or 30 months for more serious offenses. The system is straining to meet those deadlines, and in some provinces, they're using civil court resources to do it. Recently retired Chief Justice of Alberta, Neil Whitman, says the civil court system is suffering as a result.
You cannot keep up the pace that this court is presently being subjected to for long periods of time and get the quality of justice that I think the public deserves.
In Calgary, for example, the wait for a civil trial in 2016 averaged 92 weeks. This year, that wait has doubled. Alberta is perhaps least prepared to deal with all of this because the federal government has failed to fill a dozen judicial vacancies.
Maybe one of those positions has been filled so far, maybe one.
Mark Feehan is president of the Alberta Civil Trial Lawyers Association and Sandra Paraderi's lawyer.
You don't want alleged murderers walking the streets, and we all understand that. But the people that have non or less serious, like family law or estate arguments or personal injury, they all just kind of got put on the back burner.
The people like me, I don't even think we're on the back burner. I think we've been put on the side to cool.
Where she counts the days, waiting for justice. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, near Edmonton.
Next on The National, he's a movie star in Hollywood. Now Vancouver's Seth Rogen is about to get an unusual role in Hollywood North.
Hey Vancouver, it's Seth. Here's a tip to make your transit ride even more awesome. I know your bag is probably very nice and you care deeply for it, but that doesn't mean it needs its own seat. I do.
That is Rogen with some pictures of Vancouver's SkyTrain. The campaign to get his voice on TransLink is our moment of the day. But first, we want to show you a piece of a story that we're bringing you on Monday night on The National. Here's Chris O'Neill-Yates with a preview of a town that's gone to great lengths to make everyone feel welcome.
Port aux Basques, population less than 4,000, located on the southwest tip of Newfoundland.
Yes.
Somehow, though, this place has figured out enough to be labeled Canada's most autism-friendly town.
Oh, well, hello there.
The credit goes to some very committed parents and a very accepting community.
There's a lot of isolation that comes with the diagnosis of autism. So when you have this community that rallies around you, it feels great.
Joan Chachon heads the town's group, Autism Includes Me. She's made it a priority to integrate the town's autistic kids with the whole community.
We work in partnership with everyone. We don't feel like we're a secluded group of autism, and I think this is why we're getting so much support from the public.
The result has made kids with autism feel just like everyone else.
Sometimes in other places, you could get bullied for what you're doing, you could get made fun of, get called names. In Port aux Basques right here, it's not like that. Wherever you go, you see friends.
That's coming soon on The National.
And a reminder that The National today takes you inside our journalism every afternoon. That's our newsletter. It goes deeper on the top stories and highlights the stories that you may have missed. Today, an official end to the Korean War, signals of a peace agreement between North and South. Subscribe to our newsletter at cbcnews.ca/The National.
First, there was Archer's shoulder, followed by gamekeeper's thumb from cocking the trigger too much. Then there was surfer's knee and golfer's elbow, and more recently, tennis elbow and bicycle seat neuropathy. And now the latest affliction sweeping North America is arcade arthritis. It's true, arcade arthritis.
Well, you can cause a good deal of inflammation in this joint and this joint simply from coming down almost like the hammer on a piano. And if you get very passionate about it and you're trying to beat yourself, which is oftentimes the problem, then you can cause some inflammation in there.
But arcade arthritis can strike elsewhere, too.
Oftentimes you'll see the player using the joystick doesn't leave it on the table. He'll get a little body English into it, and he'll begin taking his arm around. Now, that's not a serious movement at all. But when you're at white-hot passion, and you're really trying to beat that damn blipper on there, you become very involved, and this is when you may hurt yourself, and you can give your forearm a fairly good twist. Elbow and shoulders can be involved as well.
The way to avoid these problems at the start is to gradually increase your playing time, toning up the body in the process. But that's often easier to say than to do. And if you're hooked, well...
If you had an underlying condition, for example, if you do have an underlying arthritis, this might stir it up with too much activity. The only serious implications, if you put your fist through the screen, that can be rather serious, or I've seen some injuries from throwing it to the floor and it landed on somebody's foot, but those are side effects rather than direct effects.
All I wanted was to see a movie. One down, please.
I can't sell downstairs tickets to you people.
How dare they? I could afford to buy the more expensive ticket. I run my own business. But they refused to take my money. They left me there all night. On what charge? They said I didn't pay the theater tax. But it was really about color.
Sister Desmond, appeal this conviction and your community will stand behind you.
Do you have any idea what this will do to us?
So what are you going to do? Make it right.
Viola Desmond's case inspired Nova Scotia's civil rights movement. She was pardoned 63 years later based on the injustice of her conviction.
Crawford, Thursday at 9 on CBC.
Hey Vancouver, it's Seth. Here's a tip to make your transit ride even more awesome.
Well, that will soon be burned into Vancouver commuters' brains. Today, TransLink, in charge of the city's public transit, announced hometown boy Seth Rogen as the new voice of public service announcements. His deep baritone and the story of how he got the new gig is our moment of the day.
When I found out, I was very excited and I jumped on my phone. I started writing up the web hit, the story, on my phone while sitting on a bus and sending it into the newsroom.
You can thank reporter Stephanie Ip for what you'll soon hear on Vancouver's trains.
I know your bag is probably very nice and you care deeply for it, but that doesn't mean it needs its own seat.
The voice was supposed to be Morgan Freeman as part of a visa campaign, a plan Ip and some others found a little puzzling.
After that first story came out back in May, there were a lot of people that emailed me and asked what there wasn't a Canadian actor that could have done it, there wasn't somebody local that we could have hired instead. And my first thought was Seth Rogen.
So she fired off a funny tweet, and soon after, sexual harassment allegations came out against Freeman, and TransLink dropped him. Ip's tweet turned into a hit me up from Rogen, and, well, TransLink did.
Sometimes I think it feels like you're just yelling into the void. And it was fun this time to throw something out there and have people respond to it as well as they did.
Any opportunity to enrich the lives of the Canadian people is an opportunity I will take. Those are very nice sneakers, but kind of a horror show on the soul. So get those feet off the seat. My mom might be sitting there one day. Come on.
So I take the Canada line when I'm back in Vancouver, and I hope that his announcements are on there when I get back next. And you know, Andrew, we're a country famous for comedy, so what about Brent Butt and Russell Peters and Martin Short on other transit systems? I hope this becomes a trend.
Well, I'll tell you what I hope. I mean, and this is as someone who does take public transit to work every day. I hope that laugh that I find, I mean, it's wonderfully endearing. It is unique. I hope it doesn't slowly drive me insane after hearing it for the 6,000th time. I mean, I have an open mind. We'll see. I don't know. But time will tell.
I wish I could do the laugh now. That would have been the perfect time, but impersonations are not my thing.
Well, I'll cross my fingers. One can only hope. That seems to be the theme for the night. That is the National for this July 26th. Have a good night.
Good night.